Hello guys, continuing with the same question as we did in the last video. I'll put the particular link in the description box. So taking the same case, I have just put one step forward. So let's check what was in the question there. In the question he said that T Limited, who had been issuing 1,50,000 shares for 2 rupees on application, was receiving the applications for 2,50,000 shares. So as the applications were received for 2,50,000, so how much money was received by the firm? That is 2,50,000 into 2, rupees 5 lakh was received by the company. Out of rupees 5 lakh, they can actually allot 1,50,000, that is equals to number of issued share. So 1,50,000 into 2 rupees, how much is to be taken to your equity share capital account? That is 3 lakh. There were 50,000 shares who were allotted nothing, so their money was refunded 50,000 into 2. And the people who have applied for excess number of shares, the excess here was of 50,000 number of shares. 1,20,000 minus 70,000. The excess number of shares were 50,000 into 2, so they were adjusted for calls in advance. After that, we made a due on the number of issued shares for your allotment, 1,50,000 into 8, equity share allotment to equity share capital. Now the point I have to work on is R, who had applied for 24,000 shares had not paid the allotment money. The allotment money, which was due with 12 lakh rupees, there were advance on them with rupees 1 lakh. I was to receive 11 lakh, but there were arrears on these shares also. So how much was the arrears on these shares? We need to calculate the same. Now listen here, how to calculate these shares arrears. First of all, you will take number of shares allotted multiplied by allotment money minus excess shares multiplied by application money. This formula you have to apply, right? What was the allotment money? 8. What was the application money? That was 2. Okay, right? 8 and 2. Excess number of shares applied or number of shares allotted we need to calculate. How we have to calculate in category 3, where 1,20,000 shares were there and 70,000 were allotted. If a person have applied for 24,000 shares, how many were allotted we need to calculate. So 24,000 into 70,000, cross multiplication method. 24,000 into 70,000 divided by 1,20,000, you will get a total number of shares, that is 14,000 here. Okay, you will make a calculation, cross these zeros and you will get a value equals to 14,000 number of shares. So number of shares allotted were 14,000. Who had applied for 24,000 shares was actually allotted 14,000. So how much was the value of excess number of shares applied? That was 10,000. How many excess number of shares he applied for is 10,000. That is 24,000 he applied, but allotted were 14,000 number of shares. So how much excess number he applied for? 10,000 number of excess shares. So we will multiply 14,000 into 8. The total amount due on allotment was of 1,12,000 rupees. How much was the excess? 20,000 rupees. How much was in arrears over here? That is 92,000 rupees was in arrears here. Got it? The total amount due on 14,000 into 8 on allotment 1,12,000. Out of 1,12,000, 20,000 was in excess. So 92,000 were the calls in arrears here. So how much was the amount which was left over here? to be receivable by the firm company, that is 10 lakh 8,000 rupees, right? So out of 12 lakh, 1 lakh was excess, that was calls in advance, 92,000 were arrears, so rest value balancing figure is in your bank column. Now question says you have to forfeit his shares also. When forfeiture is to be done, which account is debited? Equity share capital account is debited because shares come back to the company. Which account is credited? Shares forfeited account is credited for the paid up value, and calls in arrears account is credited for the unpaid value on the shares. How many were these shares which were forfeited? You will see not the applied, you will see which shares, that is allotted. How many were allotted to him? They were 14,000. Actually company gave him 14,000 shares which were fully called. Here the company had made application also and allotment call also. So how much was total called up on these shares? 1,40,000. How much was not paid on these shares? That was clear from here, 92,000. So how much should be transferred to your forfeited account? That is 48,000 rupees in this particular case, right? You can justify this also, how 48,000. Actually the person had applied for 24,000 share. When he had applied for 24,000, how much money he paid for application? 2. So how much was paid by him? 48,000. So these shares were forfeited for failure to pay the allotment, and in forfeiture account we take the paid value, and arrears account we take the what is not paid amount on these shares. So this is for the day. Here we discussed about the cases where your equity share application money is received in advance, how it is to be adjusted for calls in advance, and then afterwards how this is to be adjusted for calls in arrears, and how the forfeiture is done in that very case. So that's for the day. Thank you. Accountitude. Like, share and subscribe. Keep scoring.